Peace to the family. Today, I'm going to have a little short talk about a very important work for me, and it has influenced a lot of people. First, I want to say thank you to a sister, Dana Luray, for posting a video here on YouTube about the legacy of Neely Fuller Jr. Neely Fuller Jr. All right. And Mr. Fuller, as I will affectionately call him, is the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy, right? Okay, Mr. Fuller, in the code, as we affectionately call it, he talks about the 9 areas of people activity, which are war, politics, economics, education, sex, entertainment, labor, law, religion, and the 10th was added by his compadre, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, and that is of health, right? I was so happy that the sister made this video, which she was speaking about the impact that Mr. Fuller had left on her, right? She was basically saying that Mr. Fuller was like the voice of a grandparent, right? She couldn't get those values from her own grandparents, but she got it through Mr. Fuller, through his work, The Code, right? I first met Mr. Fuller and Dr. Welsing through the Race Relations Institute at Fisk University. At the time, it was being spearheaded by Dr. Ray Wimbush. I think he's now at Morgan State University. But it was at a very important time in my life. I had just come back from the continent of Africa for the first time to Gambia, and Dr. Wimbush had a hard-hitting lineup for that particular Race Relations Institute. I think at the time, Dr. Naomi Tutu was working in conjunction with him, but Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Neely Fuller, one of the queens of Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Nathan Hare. I know Dr. James Earl Jones was there, but it was just, it was a time to be had, right? And Mr. Fuller, you know, I say I done bit his style. I don't have it on today, but he was wearing those Cuba shirts, those Cuba Vera shirts, and I used to call them old man shirts. And now I find myself today rocking that Neely Fuller style, right? But Mr. Fuller, she said he appeared to her like a grandfather. I was speaking to a homeboy of mine. He was like, man, I thought Mr. Fuller was an angel. I said, yeah, he did shine like an angel. And this is circa 2000, let's say 1999, 2000, somewhere around there. So Mr. Fuller was in his 70s. He was in his mid-70s at the time. Like I said, my homeboy said, he's an angel. He's an angel. I was like, man, this is, he reminded me of Honorable Elijah Muhammad, right? And some of his philosophies, and some of the ways that he answers questions in the code are amazing. Now that I'm older and have studied a little more, I kind of like to relate it to Occam's razor, which basically you cut all the fluff out of everything. And generally the answer is going to be the simplest answer, right? So, when people look at the name, the United Independent Compensatory Code system concept, a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of white supremacy, a lot of times people want to reject the notion of being a victim because they think that being a victim will always place you in the realm of being a victim. But we push back the strength from that victimhood. We would be remiss and we would be lying to ourselves if we were saying that the system of white supremacy did not exist and that we were not victims of that said system, right? We would never be able to extricate ourselves from those chains of white supremacy, right? And one of the most poignant quotes of this text is that if you do not understand racism, white supremacy, then everything else you think you understand will only confuse you more. Check that out. If you do not understand racism, white supremacy, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you more. Sit with that for a little while and think about it, right? And then think about Occam's razor. And then go into the text of the code. For me, I'm always amazed with how people come across the code and some of the language that I hear today's speakers say when they're talking about the code, right? That term race soldiers, right? That term race soldiers, white supremacists. When you think of race soldiers, what do you think of, right? And when they're acting as race soldiers, that would make me think of the police, right? Because the police, everybody needs police, and also all civil societies have law enforcement officials. That police, that word, where does it come from? Polis, which means a state, a pole that the state revolves around. So you can't be a righteous police and be a white supremacist. So that's why the person become a race soldier, right? I'm serious. You have to get into the text of the code. It's nothing just to know the name of the book and be able to say, stay on code. That's something in common vernacular that came from this particular dispensation, this book. Right? And like I say, in tandem with Dr. Francis Cress Welsling's work, the ISIS papers, the theory of color confrontation, and so forth, once you understand those two texts, and you can spend a lifetime learning those two texts, you'd be well prepared and healed to deal with white supremacy, right? Dr. Welsing, the main point of her thesis is that a lot of the barbaric and subhuman behaviors of Caucasians or people of European descent, and the system that has evolved into, in a derogatory way, the lower level of the civilization is white supremacy, right? And white supremacy is it's an active component. If a white person is not practicing actively white supremacist, they're not a white supremacist. You see? But I would say, like the adage, who the cap fit, wear it. But a lot of times, because of the guilt and the shame, and Dr. Welsling deals with it in her text, talking about white men, they fear genetic annihilation, right? They fear this thing called genetic annihilation. And the proof of that is in this white supremacist code that they have of 14 words, right? Those 14 words are, we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children, right? Those are what, 14 words? And then they add 88 for the 8th letter of the alphabet, H. 8, Heil, Sieg Heil, Heil Hitler, right? Add on to that, Dr. Welsling studied psychiatry. She's a psychiatrist, excuse me. There's a difference between psychiatry and psychology. She's a psychiatrist. And she studied in Germany, right? Which is, you would say, probably that's the fatherland of psychology, and the hard hitters, which would be Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, the thought coming out of Germany at that time, Friedrich Nietzsche, Wagner, Max Wagner, so Max Weber, right? All of those sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists came out of Germany, and this is where Dr. Welsling studied, right? And I know people look at her theory of color confrontation and the notion of balls, big brown balls and small white balls, and they think, oh man, that I can't get with that. That shit crazy or whatever. I saw one time on the Breakfast Club, they were talking about her work and they couldn't get with it. And I was like, well, you know, they don't have this much disdain or anything for Freud. You know, the id, the super ego and super ego. They don't think nothing about that. But when it comes to a melanated woman putting out these symbolic intellectual concepts, they don't give it the same validity. But Dr. Welsling took Lefkowitz, all of the white supremacists of the early 80s, 90s. She took them to task. She never lost a debate against them. Dr. Benyukin and Dr. Welsling, they couldn't handle Dr. Welsling, and thusly on to Neely Fuller and this concept of the United Independent Compensatory Code system concept, a textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. I tell you, add this to your library, study it. And before I go, I'm just gonna share 2 thoughts out of this book. And I hope you fall in love with it and go buy it. Mine is, it's gone through, that's another story. It's gone through some things, so I'm gonna have to source a new one. I'm gonna get a new one. But anyways, let me just give you this. Help give the word love its correct meaning. Avoid using the word love to describe any feeling or condition now in existence. Reasons, explanations. Love is speech and or action that produces a result. Love is speech and or action that results in the use of truth in a manner that definitely promotes the practice of justice and correctness at all times, in all places, in all areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. The word love has incorrectly been used to describe too many different conditions in too many different ways. In the known universe, it is incorrect to pretend that love is being practiced by any person, animal, insect, place, or thing. All people, animals, insects in the known universe function through the practice and support of falsehood, non-justice, and incorrectness. By doing so, it is not possible for them at the same time to practice love. Only by eliminating falsehood, non-justice, incorrectness from the known universe can love be produced. Wow. One small concept in a book this thick. I am so thankful to have been in the presence of Mr. Neely Fuller and Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I pray that their work has been accepted by our ancestors, and they rest in perfect paradise, and that they always be remembered, and they always be mentioned at the table of justice in my eye. And with that, I say peace. And go out and copy a copy of the United Compensatory Code system textbook against racism, white supremacy. Also copy a copy of the ISIS paper and anything written by Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. If you got anything from this video, give me a like. If you feel free, subscribe. All these things are free. Help me to grow my channel, right? Because I like to stay genuine with things, and in this world, we always have to have somewhere where we can go to get some real talk and get some real answers, and that's all I'm trying to provide. With that, I say peace. Have a wonderful, blessed day.